I'm the COO of Fervor Records. Fervor's been around since 1989. I've been involved since 2002. We are a different kind of record label. So we don't go after hit songs. We're not looking for like the top 40 radio smash hit. I mean, we'd certainly love to have that. But we've built a different mousetrap. What we do is find great music or write great music, because all of us are writers at the company. We record it, and then we license it for film and TV, as well as advertising. So in the last, I don't know, I mean, some of our credits, most of them in the last month. This Is Us on NBC. We do really well on Ray Donovan, which is a big hit on Showtime. There's a great show on NBC right now called The Good Place. We have had a ton of music on that. If you're not watching that show, you need to watch it. On Netflix, Narcos just came out. We've got a bunch of music in Narcos. All of that music was actually recorded in Phoenix. We've had music in Stranger Things, which is a pretty big show on Netflix. For advertising, we've done work with Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, the NFL. We've had like 3 NFL spots this year. We're doing it all out of our studios and offices in Sunny Slope, literally off of 19th Avenue in Peoria, like 2 miles away from here. To do what we do, and because of the internet, you don't have to be in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago, but you do need relationships, and we're going to talk about relationships a little bit today and how you cultivate those and how you network, so that if you choose to have a career and want to stay in Phoenix, that there's a variety of ways that you can do that. We have generated literally millions of dollars in performance royalties for our songwriters. We're a multi-million-dollar company. We're an organization that has employees in 3 different states. Again, we're doing it all out of right here, like 2 miles away. Every single time our music airs on TV, the songwriters of those compositions are getting what's kind of called like mailbox money, which are performance royalties. And we've literally over the years generated millions and millions for those writers. I was born in New York City and raised there. Music is like this critical thing for my life. Like it's so funny because I can't talk about music without like crying. I have to think of dead puppies or something. Yeah, music is like the coping mechanism for my life, and it has been ever since I was a kid. I play piano, drums, sing. I kind of had this crappy childhood. My dad died when I was young. My mom married this kind of like jerk. Music was the only thing that saved me. It was the one thing I had to just kind of get me through all the crap in my life. So it's my job to honor the music, right? So anyways, because my dad died when I was young, I always had this like sense of urgency, because when I was growing up, I was always afraid that I was gonna die young, right? So it was kind of like, I gotta do my own thing. I gotta make something happen for myself. And so I practiced a ton, and when I was in college, I got an interview at EMI Records and became a college marketing rep. There was always this like sense of urgency, just like go, 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 do it, do it, do it. And also just quite frankly, just like get out of my house. So with that, I'm gonna come from a couple of different angles here. When I was in high school, I was playing clubs like CBGB's, Street Level. I didn't really know anything about business. I didn't know what I was going to do with music. And for my high school prom, I was with my date and my best friend and her date, and like we rented a limo for the night, right? And the limo broke down on the way to the after party, which was like a disaster, right? And like me and my best friend Dave were like totally embarrassed, and so I started like yelling at the limo driver, right? And I was just like, I can't believe this, yada, 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 for like 20 minutes, right? And like after 20 minutes, he said, all right, the limo is free for the night, right? And I was like, oh, that's what business is. I must be good at business, right? Because all I did was like yell and scream, and I was like, oh, that's what this is. That's what it means to like be a business person. So I decided to go to, I went to Lehigh University, and literally because of that moment, I decided to enroll in the College of Business and Economics as opposed to doing like a liberal arts career. And I was like totally wrong about what business was or what it meant. Because really business is a group of people that work together to sell something, right? And so in our case, our business is the business of music, and we're licensing music to companies like Warner Brothers or NBC Universal. So I kind of had like a lot to learn, and when I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to talk to you guys about, I started thinking about, well, what are all the things that I wish I knew when I was like in high school or just about to go into high school? Like, you know, what are the things that I just kind of wish I had like along the way to get me to the end result that I wanted a little bit faster? And a lot of it is really kind of behavior based. And the thing is that behavior changes slowly, right? I can't just say to you, oh, do this, and then you're gonna go off and do it, right? You have to kind of make a concerted effort to practice the right behaviors on a daily basis. And if you start to do these things, they become habits, right? It takes 21 days to make a new habit, literally, like scientifically, it's 21 days, right? So all the things that I want to talk to you about today relate to how to create positive behaviors to get in good habits now, which will then lead you to a more positive future, right? Or getting you to your goals a little bit faster. The other thing that comes with that, the corollary, the opposite, is that you also have to unlearn your bad habits, right? So kind of like the sooner that you can be like, hey, you know what, I think I kind of blew it when I did X, Y, Z, and start thinking, well, why did I do that? Or how do I prevent myself, right? How do I make myself aware of the mistake I made or these kind of negative behaviors? The sooner that you can fix it, the sooner you can turn it into a good behavior. When you start doing these things, you start creating your own luck, right? So I don't know if you've ever like looked at somebody that you've envied and be like, oh man, that guy's so lucky, like yada, yada, yada. Well, are they lucky or did they create their own luck? Did they seek out the right opportunities, or were they aware of the opportunities that were in front of them because they had good behaviors, or were they like literally lucky? I mean, if you play the lottery and you win it, like you're literally lucky, right? You're like a 1 in a gazillion chance, right? But if you've kind of set a roadmap for yourself and gotten in good behaviors and you've been conscientious of the opportunities in front of you and you're kind of self-aware, then you've created your own luck. And that's what we want to do. That's what I've been able to do. That's what I want you guys to be able to do as well. Okay, so the first behavior that we need to talk about is a commitment to excellence in everything that you guys do. Okay, so you always want to exceed expectations. It doesn't matter if you're like washing the dishes, or you're doing homework, or you're working on scales. I had a baseball coach that once told me, perfect practice makes perfect. And it's really true. It's like, that is a mantra that like I use all the time. Perfect practice makes perfect. You need to make a choice to do things as well as you possibly can, no matter how minute the task is. And even though that, and that doesn't mean that you should be a perfectionist, because that's like an unhealthy thing, right? There's no such thing as perfect. That doesn't exist. Like, my grandmother was a perfectionist and she was miserable, right? Because nothing is perfect. But we want to commit to doing the best job that we can do, regardless of what the action is that we're doing. So let me tell you a story about a friend of mine. She was actually on a Tim Ferriss podcast a couple months ago regarding exceeding expectations and commitment to excellence. A friend of mine named Anne, really, really smart woman. She went to Yale. I believe she's Vietnamese. Her father literally got on a boat right at the beginning of the Vietnam War and made it to the U.S. and had a career, and but she got into Yale, but you know, I don't think they had a ton of money at the time, so she was doing work study. I don't know if you guys are aware of like how work study programs work in college, but usually you're vastly underpaid to do menial work, and this, and then this like kind of pittance of money that you make kind of either goes towards your agreement for a scholarship, or it's some extra money that gets put towards books or whatever. Okay, so she got a work study program in the dean's office, which is like kind of a big deal, right? It's like, you know, you're kind of with like the upper management of Yale, right? Which is like a top 5 school in the world. Okay, so every day, all she's doing is photocopying stuff, right? And she's really smart, and she's thinking in the back of her head, like, why am I just, like, what is the point? Like, a monkey could do this. Like this is completely below the level of expertise that I could provide, even though she's only like 18, right? But like, she could do more than this. What is the point? So she, you know, she calls up her dad, you know, after kind of a long, tedious, you know, 4-hour session in this work study program. And her dad goes, Ann, just be the best photocopier that you can be. It's like, that's your job. I want when you make these photocopies, make sure that, or you know, make sure that the toner is evenly displayed on the page, right? Or if you've got a staple, like, make sure the staples look great. Just do everything you can to make your photocopies the best photocopies that the dean's office has ever seen. So Ann's close to her dad. She says, yes, okay, this is what I'm going to do. A couple weeks later, the dean walks up to her and says, hey, you know, I've heard you've been doing a great job here. A friend of mine is coming to town. Can you just take him and his family on a tour of Yale? Ann says, yes, okay, I'm gonna do it. So she takes this family. She doesn't really know anything about this family. She takes them on a tour. Turns out, they all have a great time. Turns out that it's like the CEO of Hewlett Packard, which is like a Fortune 500, super important technology company. Then she gets offered by the CEO, hey, why don't you come shadow me for a week at the Hewlett Packard main offices, right? So then she goes, you know, she flies to California. I think her family grew up there. She spends a week with the CEO of Hewlett Packard, right? Nobody gets a week with the CEO of Hewlett Packard, okay? Flash forward, you know, 7 years later, Ann is in a private equity firm. These are kind of like companies, I don't know if you guys know what private equity is, but private equity is essentially like companies that provide seed capital to like up-and-coming companies, and the goal is that you invest early enough and then guide them, and God willing, you know, they turn into multi-billion-dollar companies and everybody gets rich. Okay, that's like kind of what it is in a nutshell. Okay, there's more, but so Ann, through all these relationships and through creating her own luck, ends up at this private equity firm. Ann is one of the first investors in Lyft, which is now worth like billions of dollars, right? Now, I'm not saying that Ann became a primary, you know, first mover investor on Lyft because she made great photocopies, right? It's more than that. But the commitment to excellence, starting in that dean's office and following through, whether it was on the tour or shadowing a CEO at Hewlett Packard, those are all the stepping stones that became inflection points to the success that Ann has had in her career. You know, she's my age. She's like, you know, 42, something like that. You guys know what an inflection point is, right? If you have like a straight line and then all of a sudden the line changes angle, like, and it goes up or down, that change in the angle is the inflection point, right? So I talk about inflection points a lot because I want to be a positive inflection point in other people's lives, just how I've had inflection points in my life where, you know, people have said, hey, let me give you a hand, right? We all need to lift each other up, right? That's like part of what humanity is about, lifting each other up. So we all want to be inflection points in each other's lives. So anyways, you know, for Ann, it turns out that doing those photocopies and having a commitment to excellence turned out to, even though she didn't know it at the time, turned out to be one of these inflection points, right? And all these little successes snowballed and built on each other. By the way, I don't really want to talk to you, I want to talk with you. So if you guys like have a question or just want to like shout something out, or be like, this is boring, move on, just say something. It's fine. Okay, we got a question back here.
I'd just like to say, I teach at Mesa Community College, and we have a work study student in our music office. One of their jobs is to make sure that there's paper in the copy. There ain't never any paper in that copy. I got to put it in.
Okay, so
you're right. So they think the job is not important, but musicians make a lot of copies.
every job is important. Every job is important.
So she was faithful with what seemed like an unimportant thing, but it wasn't. It's important. Otherwise, they wouldn't have somebody doing it, right?
Exactly.
So
yeah, you're right.
I relate to that.
Okay, good. All right, so I got through to one guy here. This is great. So, yeah, it's really true. So, I mean, and we need to move on, but like, have a commitment to excellence. Make a choice, because it's a choice. It's a behavior, and behavior is a choice. Make a choice to excel in the things you're doing and commit to excellence. Okay, so the next thing is goal setting. So, what do you want? Maybe you don't know what you want yet. And the truth is like, I mean, when I was in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted. I mean, I thought I wanted to be like a famous rock star because that seemed like it'd be fun and I'd get a lot of girls, or I don't know, it seemed like, everything would be handed to me on a platter and I'd play in front of, 50,000 people at Giant Stadium or whatever. But kind of as you get older, so even if you don't know what it is now, maybe if you guys decide to go to college, or even if you don't and you start working jobs, you're going to start figuring out what you don't want, okay? And sometimes figuring out what you don't want is a precursor to figuring out what it is that you want, okay? So when you start figuring out what you want, you need to start writing your goals down. You write them down because it becomes a contract with yourself. Okay, so don't just think it in your head. Most of the successful people that I know literally wrote down their goals. So it doesn't mean you have to show anybody. It can be in a diary, it could be on a crumpled piece of paper that's like underneath your bed. Write your goals down. Once the goals are down, you need to write a game plan for how you're going to achieve those goals, okay? Because what you're doing is building a roadmap. Okay, so the roadmap might be wrong, okay? You might not have all the pieces, but if you have that primary goal, my goal is to be a backup singer for Sheryl Crow on, sometime in the next 10 years, okay? I'm just making this up, right? If that's the goal, well then we can start figuring out what's the roadmap to get there. Okay, well, one, my voice has to be great, right? Two, I need to know where Sheryl Crow auditions for her musicians for her tour, right? So there's like Musicians Institute in LA, for example. There's a lot of artists that hold auditions there, before they go on tour. There's others. Networking would be a piece of it. Who do I know? What are the 6 degrees of separation? How can I get in touch with Sheryl Crow's music director, right? I don't know, I'm just making this up, like literally on the spot. The point being, you need to write down your goals, and you need to write down a roadmap and a path to get there. Even if it's vague and you have to change it or continue, writing is rewriting, right? So even if you have to rewrite this thing along the way as you learn, you need to start putting these things down on paper. When you put it on paper, it becomes real. When it's just in your head, it's too easy to be like, oh, I didn't really mean that later when things don't work out. It's a way of like holding yourself accountable to, this is what I want, I'm gonna go get this thing. Even Nirvana had, the band Nirvana, they had, I just saw this in a documentary like a month or two ago, like Kurt Cobain literally wrote down, a good band practices 4 hours a day. A good band has, at least an hour and a half material that they can play live without covers. A good band knows how to do a radio interview, right? So even, Kurt Cobain's life was not easy by any stretch of the imagination, and he certainly didn't make it easier on himself. But he was smart enough to actually write down the goals and the path and the things that it was going to take to find success. Any questions so far? Okay, we're doing okay? Is it boring? Is it good? Am I going too slow? So? Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about, and actually, this is like one that is like kind of important to me because it's something that I learned at an early age, and I think it's actually been really important for me, is we need to talk about handshakes and meeting people, okay? Because look, you guys probably already know this, but it needs to be reinforced, and you probably need to hear it again. When you shake somebody's hand and when you're meeting them for the first time, that is literally the first impression that that person is getting of you, okay? And if it's a bad impression, they're probably gonna blow you off before you even get to the point where you can figure out if you've got something to offer them or they've got something to offer you, or there's some mutual exchange of value. So let's just talk about how to properly shake somebody's hand, okay? I know it's like this probably sounds dumb, but we need to do this, okay? So first of all, you need to have a firm grip, like not so firm that you're like crushing their soul, right? But like confidence, okay? And you need to look them in the eye when you're shaking their hand. And here's the trick, okay? So because this is not something that comes naturally to me, I'm actually the shyest guy in the world. Like I would rather be hiding under the covers like at 2 p.m. rather than like meeting somebody new, okay? But I've kind of forced myself to learn how to do this in a good way. So when you shake somebody's hand and you look them in the eye, you should know the color of their eyes. If you don't know the color of the eyes, you didn't do a good job. And you need to repeat the person's name whose hand that you're shaking, because if you've forgotten the name of the person whose hand you're shaking, then you've kind of blown the opportunity, all right? So here's what we're gonna do, because given the fact that I've already shaken the hands in everybody in the first row here, or most of them, CJ and Dolly, CJ, right? Yeah, and Dolly. Second row, you guys need to come up here and we're gonna shake hands. We're gonna do this right now, okay? So everybody come up here. It's handshaking time. Hey, I'm Jeff.
Nice to meet you, Jeff. I'm Alicia.
Hey, nice to meet you, Alicia. Hey, I'm Jeff. Nice to meet you, Jeff. Hey, Jordan. Steve. Hey, I'm Jeff. How you doing? Hey, I'm Jeff. Jeff. Cameron. Nice to meet you, Cameron. Hey, I'm Jeff. Abby, nice to meet you. Hey, I'm Jeff. Hey, Jeff. Nice to meet you. All right, second row. What's the color of my eyes? Blue. Blue. Boom. Okay. Good job. So actually, I gotta be honest with you. You guys did a great job. It wasn't weird. You didn't look at me too long. You didn't stare away like this. You didn't avert your eyes. Your body posture was confident. For everybody else, that is exactly, anybody else who wants to come shake my hand at the end, totally cool. But the point is, right, it's it was confident. It wasn't bizarre or awkward or weird in a way where I'd kind of be oh man, I don't want to have anything to do with that person, right? If you are not confident when you're shaking somebody's hand, then you need to fake it before you make it, okay? So just get over yourself and keep your shoulders back and have good posture and just pretend that you're confident. Sometimes when we pretend long enough, it actually kind of happens, okay? So anyways, great job, second row. Love you guys. Okay, that's all we're doing about handshakes. Next up, we need to talk about networking. And I'm kind of doing this in a very specific order because all these things build on each other. Okay, so first the first thing we kind of talked about was getting in good behaviors, and then we talked about kind of this idea of creating your own luck by doing things the right way, committing to excellence, knowing your goals, knowing what you want out of life or a career, right? Because this doesn't just pertain to a career. I mean, it really can pertain to anything. We just talked about how you meet somebody new. So the next thing we need to talk about is networking, which kind of goes hand in hand with handshakes, right? So, oh, see what I did there? Hand in hand, I didn't even mean to do that. Okay, so networking is this kind of idea that you're gonna put yourself out there and meet as many people as you can across a variety of industries. You are going to offer something of value to somebody that you meet, and quite possibly down the road, this person might be able to provide value in your life. So It could apply to you guys, since you're all musicians. Maybe you are looking for gigs for your band, right? And so you're going to need to network with promoters in order to get those opening slots on a tour or for a show, right? And so the networking is going to be something like, hey, it's always good if you can get a referral and not just cold call somebody, but we'll talk a little bit about cold calling too. But hopefully you get a referral, you meet somebody, you shake their hand, you say, hey, love your club, I've seen a bunch of shows here, I have a band, we can easily bring in 150 people because we're going to talk about what you can do for that person, not what they can do for you, right? We're going to offer value first when we network. And hopefully you guys hit it off, and then that promoter gives you a gig, right? Or it could be the same thing for an audition, it could be the same thing for a college interview, or a college application. When you meet somebody, you want to be memorable. And timing is everything too. I speak at this thing in LA called the Taxi Road Rally, where I'm kind of like on stage in front of like 600 people that are writing music, and we're kind of providing feedback for them on what's working, what's not working, what could be better. And at the very end, all 600 people rush the stage and hand me a CD saying, will you listen to my music? So I would say that is like really bad timing, right? If everybody bum rushes the stage at the exact same time, and I'm holding 600 CDs, like nobody's making a personal connection with me there, right? And they're taking, right? They're saying, can you listen to this, right? They're living a fantasy in terms of like, sign right here, kid, I'm gonna make you $1 million, right? They are taking as opposed to giving. Right? Maybe a better way to approach from a timing perspective when networking would be when you see me walking around the lobby of the hotel and say, oh, hey, Jeff, it's really nice to meet you. I'm so-and-so. I heard you speak. I thought it was really insightful, yada, yada, yada. Tell me about how maybe I could add some value to what it is that you're doing. I'm a composer and I do X, Y, and Z, right? So see how there's like a way that we could give and learn and exchange information by approaching at the right time and having a conversation as opposed to just taking and being me. That's part of networking. If you are immediately taking during these interactions, you'll get nothing because you're giving nothing, and you always give first. There's a great book called Digging Your Well Before You're Thirsty. It's by this guy named Harvey Mackay. I read it in college, and this guy sold envelopes, okay? Like, it was like a big company, like sold envelopes to like Staples. Envelopes are kind of like envelopes, okay? I mean, they all have like glue or a little thing that you like pull off and there's glue on there and you seal it down, and they all are kind of have like the same quality of paper. Like, there's nothing really that distinguishes like one envelope from another envelope. So, but the thing is that this guy, Harvey Mackay, became like a billionaire selling envelopes. So why did everybody buy his envelopes and not the other guy's envelopes? And honestly, Harvey's envelopes were a little bit more expensive than the next guy's envelopes. Well, the reason is networking, right? Because he put himself out there, he developed relationships, he gave before he took, and was able to hook clients and sell envelopes, right? So I don't know if you guys need to necessarily read the book, because that's kind of like the gist of it, right? But the idea is that by networking, by giving before we take, we can provide value, and once we've provided value, people will open up their wallets and give us money to perform a service, or give us an opportunity, maybe in the form of a job or whatever it may be. One last thing related to this, and I kind of debated getting into this because I'm not sure if you guys are too young for this concept, because I realize most of you guys are in high school, but there's something called an elevator pitch, right? So you, like, if you're in college, or maybe if you're in your 20s and you're going after one of these goals that's on your list, you should have a 30-second elevator pitch, literally the amount of time that it would take to ride in an elevator, 15 floors, that kind of summarizes what it is what your value add is, right? What it is that you do. So for example, for Fervor Records offers one-stop licensing of music to film and TV, and we're literally on TV 7 days a week. That's our elevator pitch, right? In 2 or 3 sentences, I can kind of succinctly say everything it is about our company that kind of like validates who we are and what we do to somebody in the industry. As you guys get older, you need to have an elevator pitch. If you play bass and there's 15 other bass players for an audition, you need a 30-second elevator pitch beyond your playing to convince somebody that you're the right man or woman for the job. So as you figure out what it is you want, and as you have more experiences in life, start thinking about how you can kind of condense what it is that you're doing and the value you can provide into like a 15 or 30-second elevator pitch. Okay, any questions on that? Yes.
So, why did you start Fervor Records, and how long did it take before you'd say it got big?
Okay, that is an awesome question, and it actually goes right into my next subject, which is about perseverance and not giving up. So to answer, the question, just because this is being videotaped for other people, the question was, when did you start Fervor Records and how long did it take to be successful?
Why?
Oh, why? Okay, and why? So let me, so Fervor was founded by my business partner Dave Hilker in 1989, and it was actually formed as a nonprofit. Dave was recording artists and licensing music for soundtracks, or basically like cassette tapes that were being sold, and the proceeds were going to food banks and other charities around the valley. That's back in 1989. Eventually, Dave started writing music for film and TV, and he kind of put the label on hold. Dave and I met in 2001, and in 2002, we kind of started a publishing entity. And this is starting to get a little bit deeper into the calculus of how the business of music works, and I think that might be a different speech. But the short of the long run is, we started writing music and signing music for film and TV, essentially because at the end of the day, I think what we all wanted was to have a career in music and get paid for doing what we loved. I mean, that's really the why behind it. So, but what happened is we were writing music and getting songs on shows like One Tree Hill, for example, which was like a really popular show in the early 2000s. And then like the next day we'd be getting these emails from like teenagers like, where can I buy that song? And we were like, where can you buy that song? I don't know, it's not available for sale. I was like, hey, let's reactivate Fervor Records, and we'll start commercially releasing the music. And selling music on iTunes, and now of course we're on Spotify. It kind of became like a secondary market where people would hear our music on TV shows or in a film, and they had an emotional connection to it and wanted to start buying it. So all of this kind of also relates to perseverance. As I said, I mean, this is an uphill battle. Okay, that's like a career in music is an uphill battle, and the truth is, anything that you guys decide to do, which is entrepreneurial, because music is inherently entrepreneurial, is going to be like pushing a 500-pound boulder up a steep hill every single day. We are on TV literally 7 days a week. A couple years ago, I personally had music that I wrote that was in every NFL game that aired on Fox, okay? We are, like, as a company and as an individual, we've found a lot of success. We've been really lucky because we created our own luck. But we hear no 95% of the time, okay? So 95% of the music that we pitch for film and TV, we get a hard no. When Dave and I started working together, and you guys will meet him because we'll do something together next year on like the business of music for you guys. But when we started, I cold called. Do you guys know what a cold call is? It means like when you call somebody up on the phone that you don't know and try to establish a relationship. Okay, so I cold called the VP of music at Paramount every 3 weeks for 9 months. Her name was Celeste Ray, and actually her husband used to cut Elvis Presley's hair, which is kind of cool. So anyways, I cold called her for 9 months, every 3 weeks, and kind of managed that fine line between being a pain in the butt and overcalling and not undercalling and being forgotten. and she never took the phone call, okay? But I got to know her assistant. I knew what college her assistant went to. I tried to develop a relationship with her. I knew what sports she played in college. And then, we could talk about basketball or whatever it was. Finally, after 9 months, Celeste Ray calls me on the phone and says, look, you've been really good. I have like an emergency situation here. We need a piece of music for a TV show, and we need it tomorrow, and it needs to be about such and such a theme. Can't remember what it was. I think like somebody was breaking up, and they needed like something really emotional that like teenagers would just be like, So Dave and I stayed up the entire night. Literally stayed up till like 4 in the morning because we have studios. Wrote, recorded something, FedExed it. The following day, we get a phone call from Celeste Ray, and she says, I hate it. And it was like, I think we literally went out and bought like 5 pints of ice cream and just like drowned ourselves in ice cream. It was just like, it was like the worst feeling in the world, right? And this is after 9 months of perseverance of just like trying to get this person's attention, right? But 2 weeks later, she calls back up and she says, you know what? I appreciate you doing what you did. I'm giving you a deal with Paramount so that your music is available now for all the Paramount shows. I'm putting you in a show called Charmed, which ironically they just brought back. It's like actually, like I think they just started back up on the CW like a month ago or something. And we ended up getting an overall deal with Paramount. We had music on Charmed, and once we were on Paramount, once we were kind of on that list of like, hey, these guys are okay, right? Because it's kind of like a cool club, right? And these things snowball, and you kind of have to be okayed by the top dogs. Everything started happening really quickly, because if we were good enough for Charmed, then we were good enough for another Paramount show. And then I could call up Law & Order, which was a Warner Brothers show, and say, hey, we just got on Charmed. Why don't you take a listen to some of our stuff, right? And then we got on Law & Order. And if we were good enough for Law & Order, then I could call up CBS and say, hey, I know you have a new show called CSI, right? This was a long time ago. And and then all of a sudden we were good enough for them, right? So the perseverance, this idea of not quitting and not giving up, because it is so easy to give up when it doesn't happen fast. And honestly, I think your generation is like the worst, because like everything is like immediate gratification. Like like when I grew up, like, oh God, I'm turning into an old person. It's like I can't even see you, first of all, right? Because I'm like blind as a bat. And now I'm saying like when I was a kid, but like it's true. Like when I was a kid, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, so like you had to literally go to the library to research stuff. It wasn't just there, right? And this idea of like immediate gratification is not how the real world works, especially if you're going to be entrepreneurial, like being a musician. So Sheryl Crow used to say that most people give up on their dreams before they really give themselves a chance, and I think it's true. It took us 9 months to get a deal with Paramount, and it took an enormous amount of rejection. We were just a whipping post, honestly. It's like, it sucked. But that's what it kind of takes if you want to be entrepreneurial with your life. And you kind of have to look at it the way, like Michael Jordan, like he would say in his head, if he missed a free throw, and let's say Michael Jordan was like a 90% free throw shooter in basketball, right? If he missed one, he would say, hey, you know what? I'm a 90% free throw shooter, so I know I'm gonna make my next free throw. Why? Because I make 9 out of every 10 free throws, right? So he didn't think about it in terms of like, oh God, I better hit the next one because I missed this one, right? There's a positive mental attitude and a dialogue that goes hand in hand with perseverance, which is, oh, well, if I miss that one, I know I'm going to make the next one because I'm a 90% free throw shooter. Of course I'm going to make it, right? And so even though we're rejected for film and TV 95% of the time, we think, yeah, but we've got a 5% hit rate, which is probably twice as good as our competitor, and that's one less no that we have to get to before we hit a yes, right? So you just have to, perseverance is a choice and it's a behavior, and it's just having that dialogue in your head that leads to greatness, kind of, and leads to not giving up. The conversations that we have with ourselves in our heads, are the most important conversations that we can have. So it is very easy for that negative dialogue to creep in, especially if there's other negativity in your life. you have to make a choice to turn that conversation in your head positive. If you do, it is easier to persevere and it's easier to find success and create your own luck. Okay, that's perseverance. Any questions there? Okay, all good. Okay, so the next thing is everybody that I know that has been successful in their life, and this doesn't pertain just to music. I mean, I have good friends that work on Wall Street. I have good friends that have their own businesses in fashion. Everybody that I know that has been successful never stopped learning. So I think that there's like a fantasy, especially when you're in high school, and especially if you don't like high school, that it's like, oh man, I just can't wait till this is done. Or you think, okay, I'm done with college. I know everything I need to know, and that's it. And it doesn't really work that way. So everybody I know that's been successful has continued to learn in one way or another beyond just schooling. It could be through reading blogs, it could be through reading books or articles, it could be trade magazines, it could be watching YouTube videos, it could be through finding courses that are offered in a community college. The world is constantly changing. I mean, it's funny, I'll go off subject for a second. Like if you fell asleep in the year 1000 and woke up in the year 1500, the world was like pretty much the same. I mean, if you wanted to go somewhere, you got on a horse or you got on a ship, and it took a really long time to get from, Brazil to Chile. I don't know. Everything was actually pretty static. But if you went to sleep in 1500 and woke up in 2000, the world entirely changed, right? I mean, it just off the top of my head, airplanes, internet, how we produce food and distribute it. I mean, there's a million of these things, right? The world is changing so fast, you have to continue learning just to keep up with the rate of change in the world. If you want to be successful, you need to continue learning. So don't stop learning just because you're not in school. For myself, I run a small business, but I used to work for a consulting firm that was like a multi-billion-dollar business. This was like in the late 90s. And so for me, there was a lot of value in learning how big businesses operated because I can take some of those lessons and apply it to our company. So my continuous learning is I read Bloomberg.com, which predominantly talks about Fortune 500 companies, which are kind of like the 500 largest US-based companies. I read Fortune magazine. I read a ton of blogs on personal finance because it's something that's of interest to me, right? So you guys need to kind of find those areas for yourself as well that are maybe it's a blind spot in kind of like your overall learning, or it's something that you want to improve upon. Find those things, listen to podcasts, whatever it is. Don't stop learning ever. Even like when you're 90, keep learning. Warren Buffett, who's like one of the most successful investors in really in the history of the world, he's 88. He spends most of his day reading because that's how he learns. Okay, next one is organizational skills. So this is a biggie. This was a really tough one for me. My mind is kind of like random abstract. It's like it was really hard for me in high school to listen to a lecture and take organized notes and then use those notes to build a roadmap to build an essay. That was like a disaster for me, okay? And in the real world, when you're out of school, everybody's life is unbelievably chaotic, okay? It's it is so hard to go work and then go grocery shopping and then cook a healthy meal and then go clean it and then go to the gym and exercise and because you don't want to die of a heart attack when you're 60, and then also spend time with your kids if you have kids. And I mean, it's life is chaotic, okay? And you need to have organizational skills, whether you're in school. If you kind of form these habits now, it'll pay off later. Your phone is your best friend. I mean, these phones now are unreal. You can set alarms, you can set timers, you can calendar everything. There's really no excuse for not for showing up late or not really like planning out your day in an effective way. I literally calendar everything on a work day. I say to myself, okay, at 9:30 I'm doing this from 9:30 to 10. At 10 o'clock I'm going over and to our next building and I'm talking to our distribution manager. I literally do the whole, every day is scheduled for me, and yeah, there's some wiggle room in there, but that's how I stay organized to make sure that I accomplish all the tasks that are leading to my goals. For you guys, while you're in school, you can still apply this. If school is from 8:30 to 3:30, you can put that on your calendar. If you're here from 4 to 6, put it on your calendar. When you get home, say, hey, you know what? I'm doing homework. I'm knocking out my homework tonight from 7 to 8 or 7 to 9, whatever it is. Put it on your calendar because it's going to like ding on your phone and it's going to force you to stay disciplined to perform those tasks. If you are learning an instrument, like literally calendar it. I am doing scales tonight for 15 minutes, from 8:15 to 8:30, I'm only doing scales. And then use the timer on your phone to stay disciplined enough to actually put in the full 15 minutes and not blow it off after 5 minutes because it's boring. But this structure, because nobody wants to do scales, but like, honestly, I wish I did more scales when I was your age because I'd be a way better player. Miles Davis did scales nonstop, so that he didn't have to think about it when he was improvising. He could just do it, right? So it's really true. So here's the thing. Use your calendar, use the timer on your phone, these are like the greatest tools that like I think a high school student could ever have, because I didn't have them and I was completely undisciplined in this way. I mean, I was just like watching the Yankee games and doing my homework, kind of. And I know I turned out all right, so maybe that's not like the best example, but it's like you have the opportunity to create for yourself discipline in what you're doing. And if you start now, it'll just be easier to carry this through later. Here's the last one, and then we can maybe just, I don't even know what time it is, but if there's time, we can open it up to questions. Or I just want to like briefly talk about money, because the life of a musician is not necessarily an easy one. If you're playing in local bands, you are working really long, hard hours. You're probably not getting paid what you should be paid. A lot of local bars say that they'll give you, for example, 10% of the tab, but of the night. Because really, if you're playing local bars, you're really like in the alcohol sales business. Your job is to play songs to keep people in the bar, to keep buying drinks, right? So, and then the bars will very frequently stiff you and not give you the real 10% of all the bar sales. If you are, until you get to the level, like I know some people that play with like some kind of like A-list musicians on tours, and they're making a fortune, thousands and thousands a night, and they're kind of under contract. That's kind of like the rare, that's like the aberration. That's not what normally happens. That's like the best of the best that did apply themselves and networked and did all these things right. Not to say that that has to necessarily be the goal, but if you decide to have a career in music, there's a good chance that at least in the beginning, it's going to be rough going financially. You need to find a way to live below your means. It is so hard for people to do this, and especially when you're young. Credit cards are so tempting, right? Oh, I'll just buy this because I really want it, and I'll just pay it off later. And then what happens is all your free cash flow, all your extra cash is going to pay interest on a credit card for something that maybe you really didn't want or need. A lot of people, when they say that they want to be a millionaire, what they really mean is that they want to spend $1 million. That's not the same thing as saving $1 million. Like when somebody told me that, like my mind was blown. And it's true. So, from the get-go, start thinking about saving 10% of what you're earning. Start thinking frugal. Get into the good habit now, so that when you're kind of out there doing this for real, you're in that good habit, and you can't really, don't spend it until you've saved it. Those are all the things that I've kind of got. I figured if I did anything else, it was going to be like overwhelming and too much. And so hopefully, even if only half of this stuff sticks with you today, somebody else will tell you all these things down the road, and at least the seed's been planted in your head a little bit, and maybe it'll be reinforced by somebody else. I've heard a lot of you guys play. Like literally all of you guys your chops on your instruments are way better than mine. I've heard a lot of you guys sing. You guys sing way better than I do. I do firmly believe that you guys can have a career. You can follow this path and be successful, but it's going to take a lot of discipline to truly have a career in it. And I wish you guys the best of luck, and hope I can be one of those positive inflection points along the way. So thank you.